Welcome to the deep dive. For years, one of the great mysteries in human evolution has really been the Denisovans.
Absolutely. They're this enigmatic branch of our family tree. We knew them mostly just from genetic whispers found in our own DNA.
Right, just traces. We've never actually seen their faces.
Yeah.
Well, until perhaps now. Today, we're taking a deep dive into a really astonishing discovery that seems to have finally put a face, a tangible face, to this ancient mystery, the Dragon Man skull from Harbin, China.
And this isn't just, another fossil fragment. It's a nearly complete cranium. It's about 146,000 years old.
Wow.
And it initially caused quite a stir a few years back when some studies classified it as a totally new human species, Homo longi.
Homo longi, right, I remember that.
But now some groundbreaking new research is proposing a different identity. And frankly, it's even more exciting.
Okay, so our mission for this deep dive is to unpack this incredible find. We need to understand it's a pretty remarkable journey from being a hidden artifact to, well, a scientific revelation.
Yeah, and figure out what this long-lost relative actually looked like.
And what it tells us about our shared ancient history. This should be fascinating. So let's get into the skull's own story first, because this part is really interesting. This skull, nicknamed Dragon Man, it wasn't found yesterday, was it?
No, not at all. It was discovered almost a century ago.
A century?
Yeah, possibly during bridge construction work in Harbin, China. And this was back during the Japanese occupation in the 1930s.
Wow. So can you imagine the person who found it had to keep it secret?
Exactly. They hid it for decades. Decades. Precisely because they didn't want it seized by the occupying government at the time.
That's incredible foresight, or maybe just fear.
Probably a bit of both.
Yeah.
It only resurfaced quite recently, in 2018, when it was finally turned over to scientists.
And that led to the first big analysis, the one published in 2021.
That's the one. And yeah, that study made a pretty bold claim, classifying it as this new species, Homo longi.
Based on its features, right? A unique mix.
A unique combination of morphological features, exactly. But, that classification immediately sparked debate.
Understandably. I mean, paleoanthropologists already argue quite a bit about whether Neanderthals are a distinct species or just sort of a blurry line from us.
All right, and this Homo longi classification actually placed this skull even closer to us, Homo sapiens, than Neanderthals are supposed to be. So it was quite controversial.
Okay, so if it was classified as Homo longi first, what led researchers to, well, completely rethink that?
Well, what's fascinating is that even in that original 2021 paper, the authors kind of hinted at a possible Denisovan connection.
Oh, really? Even back then?
Yeah, they noted some similarities and they sort of left the door open, saying something like, new genetic material will test the relationship.
Ah, okay. Foreshadowing.
Pretty much. And that's exactly what happened. These new studies, just published in Science and Cell, they built a really compelling case using two key pieces of evidence.
Which were?
Ancient proteins and mitochondrial DNA.
Okay, let's break that down. Ancient proteins first. What did those tell them? And where exactly in the skull did they even find proteins?
So they managed to extract fragments of 95 proteins. Specifically, they got these from the temporal bone, which is on the sides of the head.
Right.
And the crucial part was this. 3 of these proteins showed specific variations, unique genetic markers, basically, that are known only from the Denisovan lineage from their DNA sequences.
Only 3, but unique.
Unique. And proteins are important here because they are generally hardier molecules than DNA. They tend to preserve much better in fossils over these vast timescales.
Okay, so that's a strong molecular link. And then you said there was a genetic clincher, mitochondrial DNA.
That's right, mtDNA. They successfully retrieved it. But, as you hinted, not from the usual places researchers look, like the petrous bone.
No. Where then?
From the dental tartar. On the skull's tooth?
Dental tartar. Like plaque?
Essentially, yeah. Hardened plaque. It's called dental calculus, and it forms this really dense crystalline structure. And it turns out that structure can act like a little protective shield for DNA.
Huh. So the usual spots failed, like the inner ear bone or the tooth itself?
Initial attempts there failed, yes.
Yeah.
The petrous bone, the untouched tooth enamel, no luck. But the dental calculus, that worked. It yielded viable mtDNA.
Amazing. Okay, so what did this mtDNA show?
Well, the sequence from the Harbin skull closely aligned with mtDNA from several Denisovans that were previously found way over in Siberia in Denisova Cave.
Denisova Cave, the namesake site.
Exactly. And since children inherit mtDNA only from their mothers, this strongly suggests a shared maternal ancestry. A line stretching basically across Central Asia all the way to East Asia.
Wow, that's a huge range.
It is. And the protein evidence, which gives clues about the nuclear DNA inherited from both parents, that further supported this picture of a really wide distribution of Denisovans across Asia, especially during the Middle Pleistocene.
That's the period from about, what, 789,000 to 130,000 years ago?
Correct. A really pivotal time in human evolution.
So putting it together, the protein and the mtDNA evidence, that combination is what really sealed the deal. This is a Denisovan cranium.
That's the current strong consensus based on this new molecular data, yes. For the first time, a Denisovan cranium.
This is genuinely the moment many people have been waiting for. For years, Denisovans were called this ghost lineage, right? Known only from tiny bone fragments, like a finger bone, a tooth, and that genetic echo.
Exactly. Just whispers and shadows.
But now we can finally actually look one in the face. So what does the Dragon Man's skull reveal? What did Denisovans look like?
Well, the Harbin skull provides just astonishing detail. It shows they had a wide, relatively flat face. The cheekbones were actually quite small, surprisingly.
Flatter face, small cheekbones.
The large eye sockets, though, and a very prominent brow ridge, quite thick. The upper jaw juts forward just slightly, and it had really big, robust molars.
Big teeth. Okay. What about the skull shape itself?
The cranium, the brain case, it's longer and less sort of dome-like, less rounded than ours.
Yeah.
More archaic in shape, perhaps, but it's spacious. It held a large brain,
How large?
estimated at around 1,420 cubic millimeters, which is well within the range of modern humans, actually.
That is big. So it sounds like a real mix of features, some sounding older, some sounding more modern.
Precisely.
Yeah.
Paleoanthropologists call this a mosaic morphology.
Yeah.
Some traits, like those big molars and the long, low cranium, they do resemble older hominin species, maybe Homo erectus or Homo heidelbergensis.
Right. Yeah.
Yet others, like that relatively flat face you mentioned, seem more modern, closer to us.
That mosaic idea is fascinating. Does it suggest maybe a direct lineage from those older forms? Or could it be something like parallel evolution, different groups adapting in similar ways?
That's a really great question. And honestly, it highlights just how complex human evolution is. We don't have all the answers yet. Having features that resemble older species alongside more modern ones, it could reflect simply retaining ancestral traits for a long time. Or maybe, as you suggest, some parallel adaptations happening in different populations across Asia.
Okay.
But what it absolutely does
Yes.
is dramatically enhance our understanding of what Denisovans look like physically.
Mm-hmm.
Before this, our picture was so incredibly limited. We had, what, a finger bone?
The one that gave us the first DNA,
That's
right?
the one. Then a jaw fragment from the Tibetan plateau, the Jiayu.
Ah, yes, the high-altitude adaptation clue.
And another jaw fragment found off Taiwan's coast, Pengyu 1. But this Harbin skull, I mean, it's by far the most complete Denisovan fossil we've ever found. It's a game changer for morphology.
It really puts flesh on the bones, so to speak. So this deep dive tells us more than just appearance. It really reinforces how widespread Denisovans were across Asia, doesn't it?
Absolutely. We already had evidence suggesting they range from Siberia down to Tibet, maybe even Southeast Asia based on genetics, and Taiwan. Now we can confidently add Northeast China to that vast territory.
So they were really successful, geographically speaking.
They're very adaptable, it seems. And this raises that important question again. If Neanderthals are generally considered a distinct species, or at least a very distinct subspecies,
Yeah.
why not Denisovans?
Yeah. Where do they fit?
Well, these findings definitely strengthen the argument for Denisovans being a unique group, a sister population to Neanderthals. They likely shared a common ancestor with Neanderthals maybe around 400,000 years ago, plus or minus.
And their genetic legacy is still around, isn't it?
Very much so. We see their genetic contributions clearly in present-day East Asians, Southeast Asians, and especially Oceanians like Melanesians. It underscores their enduring impact on our own species.
Okay, this sounds incredibly exciting and pretty definitive. But, science is always evolving. Are there any lingering questions? Is everyone completely on board with this Denisovan identification for the Harbin skull?
That's a fair point. And no, not everyone is 100% convinced yet, although the evidence is strong.
Like who? I remember reading that Shizhuni, who was part of that original Homolonga team, still has some reservations.
You're right to bring him up. He and some colleagues have raised valid points. They highlight the challenges inherent in ancient DNA and protein work.
What are their main concerns?
Well, Nimi suggests that maybe a larger sample of those ancient protein variants would be needed for absolute confirmation. And he also raised concerns about the possibility of modern human DNA contamination in those mitochondrial DNA samples.
From the tooth tartar.
Yes,
Yeah.
especially given how many people likely handled the skull over the, 80-plus years it was hidden and then studied. Contamination is always a risk.
Okay, those sound like reasonable scientific cautions. How did the study authors address that?
They did address it. The authors of the new studies were aware of these risks and reported taking extensive measures to screen for contamination. They focused specifically on types of DNA fragments that are characteristic of ancient degraded DNA, not modern DNA.
Ah, looking for specific damage patterns.
Exactly. Things like short fragment lengths and specific chemical changes at the ends of the DNA strands. So for now, the converging evidence from both the proteins and the carefully analyzed mPDNA points pretty firmly towards a Denisovan identity for Harbin.
And does the mtDNA fit the timeline?
Yes, interestingly, the Harbin mTDNA sequence clusters most closely with the older Denisovan individuals found back in Denisova cave itself, which is consistent with the skull's estimated age of around 146,000 years.
Okay, that makes sense. And this finding, it could potentially help identify other mysterious fossils in Asia, too, right?
Absolutely. This discovery opens up really exciting new possibilities. There are other enigmatic Asian fossils, skulls found in places like Dali, Hualong Cave, Jinishan Cave, all in China.
Ones that didn't quite fit neatly anywhere.
Precisely. They share some morphological similarities with the Dragonman skull. Now, researchers might re-examine them through this lens. Could they also belong to Denisovan populations? It's a very active area of research now.
What a journey this has been from, an artifact hidden away for decades, possibly in a well,
Right.
to becoming the face of a ghost lineage. This Dragon Man deep dive has certainly given us a much more complete picture of the Denisovans.
It really has. Putting a face, finally, to those genetic whispers in our collective family tree.
It's just a fantastic reminder, isn't it, that there's still so many unknowns, so many fascinating twists in the story of human evolution.
Definitely. And that sometimes the answers are, quite literally, hidden almost in plain sight for decades, just waiting for the right technology, the right scientific perspective to finally reveal them.
So what does this all mean for you, listening right now? Well, it means that the human story, your story, is far richer and much more complex than we often imagine.
Yeah, it's filled with these unexpected branches, ancient connections, intermingling populations, things that continue to shape who we are today.
And this deep dive really leaves us with a provocative thought, I think. If such a significant fossil like the Harbin skull could remain hidden, unrecognized for so long, what other ancient ghosts might still be out there? Maybe waiting in museum drawers, maybe misidentified in existing collections, or perhaps still buried beneath our feet.
It makes you wonder.
It really does. The story of human origins is clearly far from over.